We've traveled over 40,000 miles in our motorhome over the past 4 years, and we couldn't have done it without bringing our Toyota FJ Cruiser along for the adventures. After a lot of research, we decided the best approach for us was to flat tow the FJ Cruiser. So what is flat towing? It's one of 3 methods people use to tow a vehicle behind a motorhome. It means that all 4 wheels of the FJ will be flat on the ground while towing behind the motorhome. The other methods to use are a tow dolly, which means you load the tow vehicle's front wheels on a dolly trailer, or a car trailer to get all 4 wheels off the ground when towing. All have their pros and cons. We already owned the FJ Cruiser when we purchased the motorhome and didn't want to replace it. It's a rear-wheel drive vehicle that can be shifted into 4-wheel drive. Using a dolly trailer doesn't generally work on rear-wheel drive vehicles, and we also didn't want to deal with having to store a dolly trailer or car trailer at a campsite or even at home. You may be asking why we need a tow vehicle if we have a motorhome that we can just drive around. First and most importantly, finding parking spots at stores and restaurants, hiking trailheads, or other tourist attractions for a 32-foot RV can be a real challenge. When we arrive at a campsite, we detach the FJ and set up for our stay. We put the slide out, raise the awning, set up the outdoor rug and chairs, connect the water hose, power cord, you get it. Lots of stuff. We don't want to have to pack it all back up again just to go to a restaurant. Another benefit is that we have some sort of mechanical issue with the RV and break down on the side of the road, we can quickly detach the FJ, go get parts, get gas, whatever, or even more help. Having access to our 4-wheel drive vehicle while traveling around the country has also provided us access to some absolutely amazing locations to explore. Places that we know the RV wouldn't be able to get to, nor would we want to risk getting stuck without a good off-road vehicle. This is not a how-to video. I'm sharing what worked for us based on doing a lot of online research, chatting with others in the FJ Cruiser owner community, and a bit of trial and error. We have had issues, which I'll share later in the video. I'm certainly not telling you to flat tow your vehicle or guaranteeing it will work for you. My FJ was past the warranty period, and I was okay with risking damage based on my own research. That said, I've now successfully flat towed our FJ over 40,000 miles without causing any serious issues. The components that we use to flat tow our FJ are a base plate, a wiring kit, supplemental braking system, tow hitch, tow bar, and safety cables. The most difficult component to get installed by far was the base plate. I purchased the Blue Ox base plate kit that fits my FJ Cruiser. There's different ones for different cars. The base plate comes with very detailed, accurate installation instructions that were specific to my FJ Cruiser, and they even included full color pictures for each critical step in the process. You will have to remove the skid plate, the front grille, and the bumper fascia to get access to the area where the base plate is to be installed. This is a pretty simple process, and the bolts are easily accessible. By far the most difficult part of the base plate install is drilling out the center frame rails to make room for the removable receiver arms. I didn't video this process, but you have to use a metal hole saw to enlarge those existing holes. After that, installing a base plate is pretty straightforward. Then you just reverse the steps to reattach the bumper fascia, front grille, and skid plate. You will have to cut holes in the bumper grille to accommodate removable receiver arms, but that is lightweight material and it's really easy to cut. When you flat tow a vehicle, your tow vehicle will be a few feet directly behind the RV as you drive down the road. That means that your RV brake lights and turning signals will be partially obstructed by anyone driving behind you. You're required by law to have the running lights, brake lights, and turn signals on your tow vehicle fully operational in sync with your RV. I purchased a wiring kit from Roadmaster that came with everything I needed to modify the FJ Cruiser. The install instructions were easy to follow. It took me a few hours to complete. There are many YouTube videos on installing these wiring kits if you need any additional help. Most states require the use of a supplemental braking system when towing a vehicle behind your motorhome. More importantly, you really need one to reduce the strain on your RV's brake system and ensure that your tow vehicle will come to a stop if it breaks away from the RV while driving. I chose the Roadmaster InvisiBrake flat tow brake system. There are other systems out there, but I wanted one that would be permanently mounted and could easily be turned on and off with a switch. The system has a small air compressor mounted inside my engine compartment that supplies pressure to the brake pedal mount when brakes are applied to the RV or the breakaway cord is pulled out. Our RV came with an existing 2-inch receiver hitch and wiring port. to tow a car or trailer. One modification I did need to make was to add a 6-inch riser adapter so the tow bar was more level when connecting to the FJ. More on that and lessons learned later in this video. The tow bar is mounted on the RV tow hitch, and I rarely have any reason to actually remove it. I went with Blue Ox for the tow bar since it's paired with the Blue Ox base plate I installed. It looks a little tired now, but keep in mind that this has been on the back of the RV for over 40,000 miles in all kinds of weather and terrain. If for some reason the tow hitch or tow bar fail, you'll need heavy-duty trailer safety cables to prevent your tow vehicle from completely breaking loose of the RV. These simply clip into the frame of the RV and the base plate on the FJ. Now, not all vehicles can be flat-towed. You'll need to do your own research, and there are several websites that update lists of flat-tow capable vehicles annually. By far, the most popular tow vehicle is the Jeep Wrangler. You'll see these behind many RVs as you travel. Our 2010 Toyota FJ Cruiser has an automatic transmission and is actually not flat-tow capable without making a modification. I have to remove the rear drive shaft and put the transmission into two-wheel drive when we want to flat-tow it. This may sound extreme, but it actually hasn't been that big of a deal for us. I remove the rear drive shaft before we leave on an RV trip. When we get to one of our destinations, I simply shift the transmission into four-wheel drive without having the rear drive shaft installed. This basically turns our FJ into a front-wheel drive vehicle as we drive it down the road. If for some reason we really need four-wheel drive to go off-roading during our trip, I have the drive shaft stored in the back of the FJ so I can install it. For example, on a trip to Utah's Capitol Reef area, we decided we wanted to spend a few days doing some off-road exploring. The FJ has pretty high clearance, so by parking it over a slight dip in the road, I could easily slide under to reinstall the rear drive shaft. All right, here we go. All in under. The drive shaft is held in by 4 bolts on the front of the drive shaft and 4 more bolts on the rear. You can see the rear ones here. I made a couple of heavy-duty rubber and vinyl protectors to keep the dirt and grime out of the drive shaft mount areas. Once those are removed, I can reinstall the drive shaft. You may notice some white and orange strips painted on the ends of the drive shaft. These lines are also painted on the mounts. These help me ensure that the drive shaft is mounted in proper alignment. This is where you don't want the drive shaft to drop on your face, because you will break your nose, and then that'll ruin your day. The entire process takes me about an hour. I don't do it very often, so I have to go slow and remember the tools needed and proper steps. You'll notice that I chalk my tires because I do put the transmission in neutral and remove the parking brake. This allows me to turn the drive shaft by hand very easily and get better access to each of the 8 bolts. I suspect I could do it in 30 minutes if it was all fresh in my head. Now we can go on some adventures today. Woohoo! There is a device called a drive shaft disconnect that you can purchase and install that would make this much easier. You simply pull a lever and it temporarily disconnects the drive shaft from towing. The last time I checked, it was selling for over $1,000. I didn't want to spend that kind of money. And we may in the future if we think we want to do more off-roading on our trip. I go through a 17-item checklist as we're about to hit the road on an RV trip. I know it sounds like a lot, but after doing it for 4+ years now and making some mistakes along the way, I rarely have to look at my phone for the checklist items anymore. Step 1 is to make sure the RV and FJ are both on relatively level ground. This is important because once you take the emergency brake off the FJ, it can roll forward or backwards, and you want to keep that to a minimum. Step 2 is to turn the RV engine and lights off. I do this because I know I'll be connecting the RV and FJ by an electrical cable to control the FJ's lights and prefer to have it all connected up before supplying any power to it. Step 3 is to pull the FJ close enough to the rear of the RV to connect the tow bar arms. I've done this solo before, but it really helps to have another person to get it right the first time. Step 4 is to extend the tow bar arms, connect and insert the holding pins. Step 5 is to turn the FJ engine and lights off. I always wait until I know the tow bar has been attached just in case we may need to move the FJ closer or further to properly attach. Step 6 is to connect the tow wiring that controls the FJ's running, brake, and turn signal lights. Step 7 is to connect the breakaway cable for the supplemental brakes. Step 8 is to connect the 2 safety cables. Step 9 is to go inside the FJ and flip the switch to the supplemental brake system to the on position. Step 10 is to then go back to the front of the FJ and pull the breakaway cable to make sure the supplemental braking system is functioning. Step 11, I get back into the FJ and turn the ignition to the on position. I do not turn the engine on or put it in accessory mode. I turn the steering wheel to make sure it is not locked. Step 12 is to release the parking brake. Make sure your foot is on the brake pedal, just in case you may not be on level ground. The FJ could roll backward or forward a bit until the tow bar arms engage. Step 13 is to shift the transmission from 4-wheel drive to 2-wheel drive. I should also mention that I leave the transmission in park, not neutral. The front wheels spin freely when in 2-wheel drive, as do the rear wheels when the rear drive shaft is removed. Step 14 is to make sure there's nothing that will consume power while being towed, since the engine will not be running. Turn off the radio and the air conditioning. Make sure the lights are not on. Also, make sure the windows are closed. We've almost made that mistake before. Step 15 is to make sure the running, brake, and turn signal lights are all working on the FJ. This is where it really helps to have a second person. Start the RV and turn the RV lights on. Stand behind the FJ and make sure the running lights, brake lights, and both turn signal lights work properly. Step 16, and the final step, is to make sure you didn't forget anything. I always get back into the FJ and do one more eye scan. I also learned a very important lesson about not checking the steering wheel to make sure it wasn't locked. More about that later. We've been pretty happy with our experience flat towing the FJ. That's not to say that we haven't learned a few painful and costly lessons. By far the worst mistake I made was not checking the steering wheel lock once when we were traveling from Salina, Kansas to St. Louis, Missouri. We pulled out of a KOA campground and I noticed that the RV felt like it was pulling to one side. I did stop and walk around, inspect, but I didn't notice anything obvious. So I drove a few hundred miles more before pulling over to check again. That is when I saw it. The front tires on the FJ were toast. This is what happens if you forget to check the FJ steering wheel to make sure it isn't locked. It basically meant that those front wheels on the FJ couldn't turn as the RV was moving down the road. I guess our only saving grace was the Kansas City to Missouri is pretty flat and straight roads. Curvy mountain roads could have easily blown a tire. Well, part of my checklist is to make sure that there are no power drains like the radio or AC on. While we were towing the FJ down the road, I did initially struggle with getting to our destination and discovering that the FJ battery was dead. The tow wiring does have a small power supply that's supposed to provide power from the RV to the FJ, but it simply wasn't enough power for 8 hours of driving and the added load of the supplemental brake system that does the hydraulics on the brakes. I ended up having to install an RVI tow battery charger system, and the problem was solved. That was pretty simple. I mentioned that I added a 6-inch tow hitch riser. I didn't really figure this out until we had been on a few trips, but keeping those tow bar arms level, close to level with between the FJ and the RV made a big difference in preventing the tow bar from binding up when it came time to detach. A really important thing to note if you're considering flat towing is that you cannot back up the RV when the tow vehicle is attached. I've backed it up a foot or so in a straight line, but the tow plate and the tow bar are not designed to back a towed vehicle up like that. This means that you have to really think ahead where you'll be driving, or else you risk getting yourself stuck in a bad situation. Nothing like driving 8 hours to have Google send you down a bad road and then get yourself so wedged in that you can't get out. One other ongoing frustration for us has been intermittent tow wiring dependability. That wire that connects between the FJ and the RV, you need to keep it really clean to make connections, or you'll experience the frustration of one light not working and a different light not working, just random failures off of all that. Like I said, my nemesis. Driver's side turn signal. I don't know why. Never works. Well, half the time. Those connectors are also made of cheap plastic. I've had to replace them more than once. So my cable came loose again since we gassed up. Dragged probably most of the way from the gas station. Grinded it down. I have an old spare one that I keep in the back just for reasons like this that I'm going to try to put in, but I just noticed the pins where I go to push in, the pins are retracted, so that's why it's not staying. So I can figure out what's going on there. So the real problem, I think, is this is cracked. Cracked. So, fortunately, I happen to carry a spare one with me. And try to rewire that in. A final thing to consider is that your tow vehicle will get pummeled by road grit and grime that the RV kicks up as you drive down the road. We'd arrive at our destination oftentimes to find the FJ so filthy that you couldn't even see out of the front or side windows. We've also picked up our fair share of windshield window rock chips. I finally wised up and installed a mud flap across the back of the RV, which seems to have helped quite a bit. I think that just about covers all our FJ flat towing experience. People have asked us why we bother and don't just have Peggy drive the FJ behind me while I drive the RV. Most of our drive days are 6+ hours, and that's time that we want to share together as we travel around the country. We love having the FJ with us and couldn't imagine RV life without it. I hope this video was helpful. I list the components we used in the description below. Please share your comments, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Thanks for watching, and best of luck with your RV adventures.